As July comes to a close, this is when summer starts to feel a little suspicious. The sun is still blazing, the nights are still warm, the boardwalk is still open, the woods are still calling, and every road trip still feels like it could turn into a memory you'll laugh about later. But horror knows better. Because this week, familiar things start wearing strange faces. A missing husband comes home wrong. A quiet village hides something in the trees. A beach town turns into a vampire playground. A dead slasher gets back up with lightning in his bones. And somewhere in a booby-trapped house, survival stops being a plan and becomes a maze. Welcome back to This Week in Horror History, your weekly time machine through the creepiest anniversaries in film, TV, books, and games. This week we're talking about July 27th through August 2nd. Coming up, a modern folklore novel where love curdles into something ancient and hungry. A secretive village where fear is treated like a community rule. The vampire movie that made the undead look like the coolest bad influence in town. And the moment Jason Voorhees becomes fully a supernatural horror icon. Then, right after the break, our deep cut spotlight, a late 2000s trap horror nightmare where the house itself feels like it wants you dead. July 28th, 2020, Empire of Wild receives its U.S. publication from William Morrow, bringing Cherie Dimaline's folklore-soaked horror thriller to wider American audiences. At the center is Joan, a woman searching for her missing husband. Then she finds someone who looks just like him, sounds almost like him, and stands in front of people as a charismatic preacher. But he insists he is not the man she lost. And that's the hook. Not just grief or gaslighting, but the terror of seeing a beloved's face being used by something else. The novel draws on Métis folklore and the figure of Rogoro, turning old hunger into modern dread. It's definitely a book you want to kick back with on a cold and lonely night. It's available in print, ebook, and audiobook through all major booksellers, and you can even check your local library or their apps and give it a read. July 30th, 2004, The Village releases in the US, and M. Night Shyamalan takes horror into a community built on rules, ritual, and carefully managed fear. The setup of this is beautiful in its simplicity. A small, isolated village surrounded by woods. The people know not to enter those woods. They know not to wear the wrong color. They know the creatures beyond the boundary are real, or at least they've been taught to live as if they are. The village works best when you treat it less like a monster movie and more like a nightmare about control. What happens when fear becomes the foundation of a society? What happens when safety depends on everyone believing the same story? This is one that, depending on the circles you hang in, is either overrated or underrated. I lean underrated personally, but that's just me. So maybe take a trip to the village and take a look at the real estate. It's available to rent or buy on Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. On July 31st, 1987, The Lost Boys releases in the United States, and vampires get leather jackets, motorcycles, beach fog, and one of the most aggressively 80s atmospheres horror has ever given us. And I still believe Santa Carla is all neon and boardwalk noise on the surface, but underneath it's a feeding ground. The vampires aren't dusty old aristocrats. They're young, beautiful, dangerous, and having the time of their, air quote, lives. And that's what makes the Lost Boys really stand out. They understand the seduction of horror. Monsters don't just threaten you, they invite you to stay out late, break the rules, and become something your family can't recognize. This was the ultimate movie when I was a young kid, when I was like 8, 9 years old. I watched The Lost Boys to the point where the VHS tape wore out and broke. So it's a classic. I've always loved it. I've loved the sense of humor in it, the style of it, how damn 80s it is. Everything about The Lost Boys is great. If you've never seen The Lost Boys, I'm very, very confused, but also very concerned. It's free with ads on Tubi, or you can rent or buy it on Prime Video, Apple TV, and, you guessed it, Fandango at home. And on August 1st, 1986, Friday the 13th, Part 7, Jason Lives, releases in the US, and Jason Voorhees stops being merely hard to kill. This is the film with the lightning bolt resurrection. It features a grown-up Tommy Jarvis who's haunted and desperate, so he digs up Jason's body to make sure the nightmare is truly over and gain some closure. Instead, he accidentally gives the franchise one of its most impressive images: Jason reanimated by a storm, rising from the grave as something bigger than a man with all the gothic fun of Frankenstein. Jason Lives is where the series does get sharper and more self-aware with its humor, but it doesn't lose the slasher engine that powers the locomotive, as there's plenty of slashing to go around. It may be ridiculous, but it's powerful nonetheless. And Friday the 13th Part 6 is one of the very well-loved Friday movies, and I do love Part 6. Its tongue-in-cheek attitude toward itself just kind of takes me out a tiny bit, but that doesn't mean it's not a blast, especially if you love all the other ones, because that's what it's riffing on. But I also want to mention that when I was in high school, during the brief time that I was in high school, I actually wrote a report involving Friday the 13th Part 6, where I explained how Jason Voorhees had went from a kind of woods-dwelling redneck He-Man who was hard to kill to a full-blown zombie because of the resurrection scene in Friday the 13th Part 6. So I've always been this way, kids. It wasn't some head trauma that happened later in life. But if you want to give Friday the 13th Part 6 a watch, it is a perfect summertime watch. It's available with your subscription on Paramount Plus, and of course you can rent or buy it through any of the major platforms like Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. Tomorrow, right here on Weekly Spooky, some relationships end with heartbreak. Others refuse to die. In The Ties That Bind by Rob Fields, Buster Crane has always been lucky in the ways of love, but maybe too lucky. His first love, Talia Mirren, vanished from his life when they were children. Years later, he found something deeper with Romy Gillian, a beautiful, mysterious young woman who lived beside a graveyard, never ate in front of him, and kept every mirror out of her house. Then Buster discovered the truth. Romy was a vampire. Terrified, he ran. But you can't outrun someone who can hear your heart beating. Now Buster is beginning college, and fate has brought Talia back into his life. Older, wilder, and determined never to lose him again. For the first time in years, Buster thinks he may have escaped Romy's shadow, until she follows him into a crowded nightclub, locks the door behind them, and his former lover makes it clear that 4 years of passion simply cannot be forgotten. So make sure you're subscribed to Weekly Spooky and come back tomorrow, because the person who loves you may also refuse to let you remain human. Alright, Spookies, let's take a quick breather, but when we come back, we're stepping in to a house full of traps, a thief in the wrong place, a masked killer who doesn't just hunt people, he arranges them. And once the doors close, escape becomes another part of the design. And we're back. So let's get into it. On July 31st, 2009, The Collector is released in the United States, and late 2000s horror gets one of its nastiest little puzzle boxes, Hellraiser films notwithstanding. The premise starts like a crime thriller. A desperate man breaks into a wealthy family's home, hoping to steal enough to solve his problems, but someone else is already inside, someone who's turned the house into a machine of wire, blades, locked rooms, and human panic. What makes The Collector special is the shift. The burglar becomes the rescuer, the home becomes hostile architecture, and the masked killer feels less like a random intruder than a curator, someone preserving fear, pain, and helplessness, like specimens behind glass. This is not cozy horror. It's sharp, mean, and mechanical. That's why it's a perfect deep-cut spotlight. It earns its place, capturing a very specific era, post-Saw, home invasion, and the fear that every safe room may already have been prepared by someone far worse than you. The Collector, I think, very underrated. I actually discovered The Collector because its sequel, The Collection, was released wide in theaters, and I went to see it on a lark. I loved it and ran home and rented The Collector right away. This is a perfect Saw-era horror film that delivers in every way, not just the torture porn elements, but really keeps the scares going and keeps you wondering, what contraption will they think of next and what will it do to human flesh? So if you want to find out if the film belongs in your collection, it's available free with ads on Tubi, Pluto TV, and Plex, and of course you can rent or buy it through Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. Now let's light a creepy candle for some horror birthdays, starting on July 29th, 1941, when David Warner is born. Unforgettable in The Omen, let alone Waxwork, and countless other genre roles where his presence made everything feel more doomed but also more classy. David Warner can be put in just about any type of film and bring a level of authority that makes it all the more real. A very happy birthday to David Warner. I remember him from Secret of the Ooze. On July 30th, 1947, Arnold Schwarzenegger was born. I know, not a strict horror dynasty member, but being in Predator alone earns him a place in the Creature Feature Survival Hall of Fame, right? Plus, don't get me started on Maggie, which I really enjoyed, and a lot of his later action fare in the late 90s was very horror adjacent, lots of stuff like End of Days, although I'm not saying that was a great film, but Arnold Schwarzenegger is a great actor, and we're claiming him. Sorry, not sorry. A very happy birthday, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'll have a cigar or 5 to honor you. And born on July 31st, 1956, is Michael Biehn. What a coincidence, because I didn't mention how Terminator was clearly a horror film as well, just a kind of sci-fi time travel slasher. But Michael Biehn, who played the weary soldier Kyle Reese in The Terminator, he also has highly memorable roles in Aliens and, of course, Planet Terror from the Grindhouse series. So Michael Biehn is definitely in the realm of our horror heroes. A very happy birthday, Michael Biehn. And finally, this is a biggie. Born on August 2nd, 1939, is Wes Craven. One of horror's defining architects, from The Last House on the Left to The Hills Have Eyes to A Nightmare on Elm Street to Scream. The guy redefined the genre multiple times in one lifetime. He's a fascinating artist and one of the most talented and, in my opinion, underrated directors to ever live. I miss him, and I wish he was still making movies and still offering up his opinions and insights into the world. He's very missed. A very happy birthday, Wes Craven. And to all of our horror birthdays. For our then and now bite, this week draws a strange little map of horror's favorite trick, making the familiar unsafe. Empire of Wild gives us a loved one who comes back wrong. The Village gives us a home built on fear. The Lost Boys turns the beach town cool kid into a predator by night. Jason Lives turns a slasher into a thunderstruck legend, and The Collector reminds us that even a beautiful house can be a trap if someone has already been inside it for long enough. Different decades, different monsters, same awful question. What happens when the place you trusted starts obeying someone else's rules? And for our weekly recommendation, we head to August 2nd, 1985, when Fright Night released in the United States and gave us one of the great Vampire Next Door setups. Charlie Brewster is convinced his charming new neighbor is a bloodsucker. The problem is, nobody believes him. So he turns to Peter Vincent, a washed-up TV horror host who made a career pretending to battle monsters on screen. And that's where the movie becomes magic. A horror fan, a horror host, and a real vampire forcing make-believe bravery to become actual courage. It's funny and spooky. It's stylish and deeply lovable. It's the kind of vampire movie that understands both the fear and the fun of the folklore. I've always loved Fright Night. It's one of my absolute favorite horror movies to watch over and over and over again. I love the character of Charlie Brewster. I love the relationship he has with his mother. I love the vampire next door, all the vampire lore, and of course, Peter Vincent being one of the best examples of a reluctant hero in horror cinema, second maybe only to Ash Williams from Evil Dead. It's a great, great film. If you haven't seen it in a while, you need to watch it. And if you've never seen it, you should just stop what you're doing right now and check it out, because it's available with AMC Plus if you have a subscription, or of course you can rent or buy it on Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. I really can't recommend this one enough. All right, Spookies, that's your trip through July 27th through August 2nd in horror history. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we have that brand new horror story waiting for you right here on the Weekly Spooky feed, so don't miss it. And of course, there's something scary for you to enjoy every single day of the week right here at the Weekly Spooky feed, so make sure you're subscribed, and while you're at it, tell a Halloween-loving, horror-loving friend of yours to give the show a listen too. I'd appreciate it. And of course, I'll be right back here to take you through another dive into the horror calendar in no time flat, but until then, remember, our days are numbered. because that's how we tell them apart. See you next week.